going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast, your premier podcast for all things Oregon football and recruiting. Super happy and super stoked to be back with you guys for another episode of the pod and another edition of the Oregon Recruiting Hour. And if you guys are new here, this is something that I like to do usually once a week if I can. Things have been a little hectic and I haven't really been able to do the podcast as much as I have wanted to. So apologies for that. Apologies for the late start today. Just kind of trying to crank out some stories heading into the weekend here. Got some recruiting updates. So that being said, there is a ton of really good stuff over on ducksdigest.com. If you guys haven't been able to check it out, highly recommend you go over there. I got my score prediction story. I got 5 questions with a Utah reporter ahead of tomorrow's huge game between number 8 Oregon and number 13 Utah on the road in Salt Lake City. You got injury stuff for the Utes, my offensive and defensive keys to the game for the Ducks. So tons of really good stuff over there. Please go do me a favor and check out ducksdigest.com. That's where you can always read all of my written stuff. But man, we got some stuff to talk about because it is an active time for Oregon on the recruiting trail. Coming to you guys live right now on a couple different spots. YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres, Twitter at mTorres Sports, and even on the Ducks Digest Facebook account. So wherever you guys are tuned in to today's episode, really happy to have you guys along. If you guys have any questions for me, go ahead and throw those in the live chat. I love doing live streams because it gives you guys direct access to me and I can answer your questions. I was on with Ryan Winter, aka Sports Chat 503, earlier on this week before he made the trip out to Salt Lake City. I won't be in Salt Lake City, but I will be in Eugene next weekend for Oregon against Cal, as well as the following weekend and throughout that whole week for Oregon versus USC. So cannot wait to be back in Eugene. Those are just a couple of housekeeping items to start us off here on today's show. First guy I want to talk about is someone that I actually just finished writing about, but I was at a game last night here in Long Beach. So I want to talk about Dylan Williams, 2024 Oregon linebacker commit out of Long Beach Poly. I've gotten to see Dylan a lot in person since I moved out to Southern California last summer/fall. And man, I'm more impressed with this guy almost each time that I see him. He is just an absolute stud. Him and the Jackrabbits took home a 56-14 win on Thursday night over the Long Beach Jordan Panthers. That was the last game of the regular season for Poly. So they took home the Moore League title with that win on Thursday night. And Dylan Williams had himself a really good game defensively. I saw him involved in TFL and was just kind of all over the place, did a good job of containing Panthers quarterback Jarrett Nielsen, who likes to run it a little bit when he can. They also had to contain Arizona running back commit Jordan Washington, who is one of the fastest players in the state. He was number 2 in the 100 meters last year behind only Oregon true freshman corner now, Roderick Pleasant. So he's a big-time playmaker that the Jackrabbits had to try to contain. He did have 2 touchdowns on the night, but the Long Beach Poly defense was dominant in their win over Long Beach Jordan on Thursday night. Got to check in with Dylan after the game just to kind of get some of his thoughts on his senior year and kind of the latest that's going on with him. And I always like these interviews. I wasn't really expecting to hear anything new when I talked to him, but it's always great to just kind of chat with these guys. He talked to me before the season about how he wanted to win the Moore League, championship. That was one of his goals for his senior year. And if you guys aren't too familiar with the Moore League down here in Southern California, that has teams like Long Beach Poly, Long Beach Wilson, Long Beach Millikan, Long Beach Jordan. I think Compton is also in that league. So that just kind of Lakewood as well. I think Lakewood used to be a big powerhouse program out here in the Long Beach area. But Long Beach Poly has been utterly dominant. I mean, for so long. The Ducks got Dalen Austin, a 2023 All-American cornerback out of Long Beach Poly last year. They flipped him from LSU. And now they got Dylan Williams coming in, and he's looking like a guy that is going to be capable of at least competing 4 snaps early. I mean, he's a physical guy, athletic guy, even played some tight end yesterday in that game. And he's actually going to be playing some more tight end as they get into the playoffs here. And I was looking at the bracket and talking to some folks on Thursday night, and Long Beach Poly might even draw a matchup against St. John Bosco. I think that is a huge matchup. I'm going to be in Eugene, so I actually might end up missing that one. But that's a possibility for Dylan Williams and Long Beach Poly. So that's a matchup to keep an eye on. But he had a touchdown catch at playing some tight end last night, and it actually got overturned. Not overturned, but it was ruled incomplete. He clearly had a touchdown. Had a foot down. You could see it in my video over on my Twitter account at Torres Sports, and he did have control over it as well. But, those are the breaks sometimes. Just fun to see him. Another thing that he mentioned was that a couple of schools are still recruiting him, and you can find the full interview, full quotes over on ducksdigest.com. So just got to mention that because I'm not going to hit on all of it here today. But he talked about Miami, Utah, Penn State, as some schools that are still recruiting him pretty heavily. Michigan State as well. This was a Michigan State versus Oregon recruitment before he committed to the Ducks in July. But he said that he's 100% Duck lock. He doesn't have, fans don't have to worry type of a deal. He's going to be enrolling early. And I think, like I said, he's a guy that could potentially, make an early impact for the Ducks. He's one of 3 4-star linebackers that Dan Lanning and the Ducks have committed here in the 2024 recruiting class, along with Braden Platt and Kamar Matudi, who is also a Southern California native playing his senior year at Los Alamitos. So I'm really liking this linebacker haul. I think the Oregon linebacker haul might be my favorite position group in this class, but I don't think the Ducks are done on the defensive line. They're surging for guys like Elijah Rushing, Jericho Johnson, to name a few. Also going after Solomon Williams out of the state of Florida. So when this is all said and done, you guys, Oregon's defensive line haul could end up being the very best in the entire country. We're talking even better than Georgia, possibly. They did beat out the Bulldogs for 5-star defensive lineman Aiden Breland out of Mater Dei not too long ago, just about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. So the Ducks have a top 10 class right now, 23 verbal commitments, with Breland being that headliner. So definitely wanted to start off today's show just talking about Dylan Williams and kind of where things are at with him. He said he's going to try to get up for the USC game just to get one more visit in, one more time in Eugene before he has to get up there and enroll as a true freshman early enrollee. And one of the last updates that I got from him was actually, I always like to ask commits, are there any guys that you're peer recruiting that you want to have join you in Eugene once you're there playing your college ball? And there was one name that came to mind, and he was very quick. There was no hesitation. 2024 running back Nathaniel Frasier out of Santa Ana Mater Dei. This is another guy that I've heard about multiple times now, right? I got you guys that update after I went to see Breland last week, and he said that he was trying to flip Nate Frasier along with Brandon Baker. So we'll talk a little bit here about Nate Frasier and the Ducks and also Brandon Baker here in the 2024 recruiting class. Just waiting for this ad to go away, and then I'll get the highlights up. We got Nate Frasier. He's currently committed to Georgia, for those of you guys that don't know. And Oregon was one of those schools that was relatively early in terms of the offer for Nate Frasier. I mean, this dude's just a stud. Every time you see him play, he's a beast. I think he had a pair of touchdowns when I saw him last week in Mater Dei's blowout win over Orange Lutheran. And then Timonacci is asking the question here: what chance does Oregon have of flipping Brandon Baker and Nate Frasier? 90% or 50% or 10% or 0%. I mean, I can start off. I think that the Brandon Baker flip is a long shot, and I say that because I think that their priorities are really with Jordan Seaton out of IMG, as well as Eddie Pierre-Louis out of Tampa Catholic. Two Florida standouts. Seaton was the 5-star that was on campus last weekend for an unofficial visit. Wasn't his first trip to Eugene, and I don't think it's going to be his last trip either, because that was an unofficial visit for Seaton. He is going to, in my opinion, I think he's likely going to come back for an official visit. He's an early signing period guy, so that kind of means that Oregon has a limited window here to get him back on campus. I think the USC game is probably the most likely, even though that's only a couple of weeks away. I think that's just going to have a bigger draw. Or you could sit in the Cal game, that's for sure. Or you could talk about the Oregon State game. That one comes right after Thanksgiving, that they're going to have that one. So I don't think that Brandon Baker is. I mean, I think he's a guy that at one point I really thought that Oregon was in the lead for him, and I thought that he was going to be headed to Eugene. I even put my prediction in for him, but then as it came time and came closer to a decision, I was getting a lot of intel that was saying it was trending towards Texas. And what do you know? Brandon Baker is a Longhorn. So I think that Brandon Baker, I wouldn't get your hopes up on him right now. As for Nate Frasier, he said that the contact between him and Oregon has only ramped up since Aiden Breland committed to Oregon, which makes sense, right? I'm sure they're saying something along the lines of, "Hey, we got Aiden, and we'd love to get another modern day guy in the fold here for this 2024 class." And I've told you guys from the jump that, and maybe not the jump, but for a long time, I've been telling you that Nate Frasier has been Oregon's top running back target in all of the 2024 class. They already have Dejon Riggs out of St. John's committed in this class from the Washington, D.C. area. And then Jason Brown Jr. is a little bit of a question mark for me. I still have my prediction on Oregon, but I think I have to see what's going to happen as far as him setting a commitment date and, you know, what the latest intel is there. I haven't really heard anything super new on Jason Brown Jr. out of Seattle O'Dea High School. That one's an Oregon versus Washington battle after he initially announced the top three of Oregon, Washington, and Michigan State. But with Michigan State firing Mel Tucker, you figure that they're probably out of it for Jason Brown Jr. And Washington wants to capitalize on this opening with Jason Brown Jr. So if it really comes down to it and Oregon has a choice, I feel like they would probably prefer Nate Frasier. I just think he's a bigger back, a little bit more well-rounded, and has a super, super high ceiling. He's definitely a bigger back, like I said, than Jason Brown. And Jason Brown's talented, awesome kid. I've gotten to meet him a couple of different times. You know, he's always a great interview. But yeah, if it came down to it, I think that Oregon would probably go for Frasier. They're going to keep pushing there. I think he is an early enrollee guy, but I got to check. I know he did track this past spring, but you know, Georgia usually likes to try to get their guys in there as early enrollees. That's typically the case. So that's kind of the latest I have with Nate Frasier. I think that he's I guess I'd say realistic flip for Oregon. I'm not making that prediction right now, but that Breland commitment certainly only helps Oregon's efforts here to flip Nate Frasier away from his Georgia Bulldogs commitment. That was a pledge that was made in August. So as far as chance of flipping, let's see. I would say I'd say Brandon Baker, I guess 10 if I have to choose from this list here. And then maybe I'll go 50% for Nate Frasier. The confidence meters or scales are always a little bit tricky when it comes to recruiting, but I can tell you that it's more likely they flip Nate Frasier, I think, than Brandon Baker based on the latest that I'm hearing in the 2024 recruiting class. All right, let's see. And then Up to Sco says, I think Baker stays Texas. Seems to me staff is trying to take home Seaton while working for Nate. Yeah, I think that's basically kind of what I'm thinking too. That's my reasoning. And then Up to Sco asks another question here. When do you think Breland will commit? It's been about 2 weeks since he decommitted. Which teams are you hearing that are piquing his interest / stopping him from committing? Assuming you're talking about Elijah Rushing here, because Aiden Breland already committed. With Elijah Rushing, I think this is an interesting commitment to kind of keep an eye on here, or recruitment, I should say. I shouldn't say commitment. Elijah Rushing is certainly a very interesting recruit to keep an eye on here, seeing that he did decommit from the University of Arizona. And I mean, even when he committed to Arizona, I didn't really think that his heart was in it. And I only say that because of watching the stream. And it really just felt like it was pretty orchestrated and honestly a little bit rehearsed when he committed to Arizona. And I knew that Oregon was never going to go away in that recruitment, just with how much effort and time they put into that recruitment with Elijah Rushing, continue to put in with him. 6'6", 251 pounds, out of Tucson, Arizona, Sal Point Catholic. Obviously, the hometown hero element was something that was at play for him when he first committed to Jedfish and the Wildcats, but Oregon has stayed in constant contact. I mean, I even heard, last week, I think it was, that they were talking to him in his camp multiple times and one day. So I think Oregon still is the clear-cut favorite for Elijah Rushing. I wouldn't doubt that other schools are still trying to stay involved here. Tennessee got him out for a visit before, I think it was an official visit before he committed to Arizona. Notre Dame was also a school that was involved with Elijah Rushing in the earlier part of his recruitment. Florida as well, when his younger brother Cruz was at Florida, but now Cruz Rushing is back home in Arizona, I believe, playing for the Wildcats. So that was obviously a big part, the family connections that the Wildcats had to Rushing and his family, and being so close, being a Tucson native, that's something that makes it easier for you to take those trips, obviously. Give me a little second here to take a sip of some coffee. Yeah, it's 1:30, and I think I'm on my third cup of coffee. I'm just fired up, excited for a big weekend for the Ducks. That game against Utah is keeping me plenty busy. And then there's always the latest on the recruiting trail. Also got to talk with Dylan Gresham, Oregon wide receiver commit in the 24 class that was recently on campus. Go give that one a read if you haven't. And then, Tim Minacci is talking about 2 more crystal balls 3 days ago by top 247 analysts Greg Biggins and Brandon Huffman for Rushing to commit to Oregon. If you guys have been following me and reading my stuff for a while, I have a pinned story on the homepage over at Ducks Digest, and I put my prediction in for Oregon to land Elijah Rushing on, I think it was October 8th or 9th. I was out of the country at that point, so I wasn't really able to work as much as I guess I would have liked to. But once I saw he decommitted from Arizona, I immediately put that prediction in for him to end up going to Oregon. There's just too many connections. Love the development there by Dan Lanning and Tosh Lapoy. The defense is playing really well. Good players want to play with good players. And I think the Breland commitment only gave them even more recruiting momentum for Elijah Rushing. So not really any new updates. I think that, timing really plays a big role in recruiting. And sometimes you'll see, I don't have any evidence of this in the past or even right now, but I think it's not far-fetched to think that the Oregon staff has had commitments ready to go in the past, but they tell the recruit to kind of hold off for a bit and try to line it up with like a big win. So maybe, I don't have any intel on this, but maybe Rushing's ready to pop and they just want to wait until this game against Utah. Maybe you're looking at Oregon getting a win and possibly landing Elijah Rushing shortly after. That's a hypothetical. Like I said, again, I don't have any intel on that, but just kind of spitballing a little bit. But either way, only continue to hear positive buzz about Elijah Rushing and Oregon. I think you just got to be patient sometimes. And, these things will happen when they happen. Let's see. We've got some other comments here. We got Playboy 1625 with a question. It's probably a long shot, but there any news on Kobe Black that could be taking an OV to Oregon? We're the only school he hasn't taken an OV to out of his top 5. Yeah, so if you guys don't know who Kobe Black is, just to give you a little bit of a background here, he is a 2024. I could have sworn he was a corner, but I guess he's a safety at Waco, Texas, Connolly High School. He's a 5-star guy. Has Oregon as one of his finalists, along with Texas, Texas A&M, Ohio State. Those are some schools in the mix. And there's not really any new there's not really any news as far as that I'm hearing, at least as far as Oregon and Kobe Black right now. Maybe I need to check in with my sources a little bit, but I think really if you're looking at Texas recruiting, I mean, I think Texas is probably, they've been the clear-cut favorite and the school with the most buzz the Longhorns have for Kobe Black for a majority of his recruitment. But I still don't know if he has. Does he have a commitment date? I need to look at his Twitter and see what's going on there, because I don't know if he has a commitment date just yet. Yeah, he doesn't have a commitment date right now. But just to confirm what I was talking about earlier, top 5 of Oregon, LSU, Texas, Texas A&M, and Ohio State. So those are some pretty heavy hitters. LSU just pulled off a huge flip yesterday. LSU flipped a big-time offensive lineman. I don't know his name off the top of my head, so I have to go check it out. Was he not in the 2024 class? I'm tripping. I guess he was 2025. Give me a second here. I'm having a total brain fart right now. Where did Texas A&M? Let's see. Weston Davis. That was his name. Okay, yeah, Weston Davis. Oh, he's a 4-star, I guess. He was a 5-star, I think, on 3, but 4-star Beaumont United offensive tackle Weston Davis flipped from A&M to LSU yesterday. So that was like one of the big storylines if you're looking more big picture. I think that's something that I really like to do, you guys, is just go outside of Oregon sometimes, because there's so many recruiting storylines across the country, and who knows, maybe these guys will be competition with Oregon on the recruiting trail, or they'll play each other in a bowl game, or maybe even down the road in the Big Ten. But yeah, as far as Kobe Black, I think I haven't heard anything about him in Oregon lately. I think Texas is still the favorite there in that recruitment. Tim Minachi with another comment. Most of the media, along with national stats, has Oregon playing at a top level, regardless of the UW loss. Do SoCal recruits feel the same way? And what kind of growth and interest has it caused? Yeah, I think I haven't asked too many guys about the Washington loss, but I think the broad feeling is that even though Oregon lost to Washington, I don't think you came out of that game thinking any less of the Ducks and kind of what they're able to do on the field. Because you went to Washington, into Seattle, into a hostile environment, and you kept it within 3. You went against one of the most explosive offenses in the country. Sure, it was a winnable game, but I think that if you have a game that close, I don't really think it hurts your recruiting efforts, because you were competitive and you had a chance to win. There weren't any like crazy boneheaded decisions. I think a lot of people obviously want to talk about Dan Lanning's 4th down play calls in that game. I think you take the points before half. I've talked about that before, but I don't think there's that much else that I would have done differently. So I think that the loss to Washington hurt Oregon fans, obviously. Another rivalry loss for Dan Lanning since coming to Oregon. That's obviously not where you want to be, but I don't think it's something that's going to sway a recruiting battle right now. Darius P. with a question, what about Jericho Johnson? Yeah, Jericho Johnson's heading to Salt Lake this weekend for his Utah official visit. I think 247 Sports was reporting that. It might have been Greg Biggins or Brandon Huffman. But that's a big trip. That's a big trip because Utah is playing some really good football. They're going against Oregon. and they're one of his 4 finalists. You have Oregon, Utah, USC, and Washington for Jericho Johnson, 4-star defensive lineman out of Fairfield, California, Armijo High School. So I think that, I don't know, it's interesting. It feels like Washington has more recruiting prowess or more recruiting power than Utah. But I just think that's because Utah hasn't really been a school that's taken recruiting elite guys super, super serious, which is odd to me because Kyle Whittingham's the best coach in the Pac-12, and they've always been a school that can do more with less. So imagine if Utah were recruiting at the level Oregon was. I don't think that's super realistic to say, but yeah, it's surprising to me. I think that Utah could be doing so much more than they are on the recruiting trail. But hey, maybe there's a run coming for Utah. I don't know. But as for Jericho Johnson, I think Oregon still leads there. Had a really strong visit out to Oregon for the Colorado game last month, and I don't think that there's necessarily anything to worry about for the Duck fans that are following that recruitment. I think that he's trying to make his decision in-house next month before going public with it during the early signing period. So I think there's still some time to get him back on campus if you want. But Washington is still the main threat there for Oregon with regard to Jericho Johnson's recruitment. I think I feel confident about this one in large part because of Tosh Lupoi. Tosh Lupoi is one of the best recruiters in the country. Certainly one of the best recruiters, if not the best recruiter on Oregon's staff right now. You look at what he's doing at the edge spot, especially if they can get Elijah Rushing, and then along the defensive line with guys like Tion Gray and Davian Sims. So not really anything new on Jericho Johnson, but he's going to be in Salt Lake City this weekend for Utes versus Ducks. So I think that's a big thing you got to keep an eye on. We got a question from Jay Bryan. Thanks for the question. Jay Bryan asks, what's the confidence level for Solomon Williams committing to the Ducks? Yeah, Solomon Williams is a dude. There's no question about that. Solomon Williams coming out of the state of Florida, 4-star edge rusher that has Oregon in his top 5 right now, with the likes of Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama. Oh, man, it's getting a little bit fuzzy for some reason with him as far as his tops go. But that's a guy that Oregon really likes, and he was just on campus for an official visit. No, yeah, that was his official visit. He was supposed to come out last month, but I think I heard some family stuff came up, so he kind of had to reschedule that official visit. But he reportedly said that Oregon's in his top 2, which is a significant update. I thought it was going to be Oregon and Alabama. I think I saw someone comment on one of my videos that it's Oregon and Texas A&M. We know that Texas A&M can mix it up with the best of them on the recruiting trail, especially when it comes to defensive line guys. But you saw all the D linemen they got in that 22 class, and I don't even know how many are still there. So I guess Texas A&M doesn't worry me too much, but they've proven to be contenders on the recruiting trail under Jimbo Fisher. I think that he's fallen very short of expectations out there in College Station, but they're still going to be a competitive team as far as recruiting goes. I think Solomon Williams is supposed to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend for an Alabama visit, which would back up what I was thinking about Bama being the other finalist, if it is indeed down to 2 for the Carrollwood Day edge rusher. I'm feeling good. I just think that, I haven't gotten to interview him myself, and I want to ask some of my sources how they're feeling, but I'm feeling pretty good about Oregon's chances here with Solomon Williams. And I think part of the reason for that is because of the premium that Dan Lanning is putting on recruiting the edge rusher position. Because Oregon already has a commitment from Jackson Jones out of Yuma Catholic, Arizona, but we're looking at a situation where Oregon could realistically get Elijah Rushing, Jackson Jones, and Solomon Williams. I mean, that's insane. And they might get Jericho Johnson. Like, there is no position in my mind that Dan Lanning is recruiting harder, and in turn that Oregon is recruiting harder than defensive line. You're losing a lot of guys after this season. Dorless, Popo, Casey Rogers, to name a few, maybe Jordan Birch. So you just can never have too many top tier elite defensive linemen. You can't. And I think that's part of the reason that they've been so successful this year on defense. They've had so many bodies. They've built the depth at that position that you can just rotate guys in and keep them fresh. And you have true freshmen like Mateo, Tatum, Blake Purchase that are all making an impact for you right away. And that helps you just kind of situationally get guys in there. So I wouldn't say it's likely that they get all those guys right now, but I mean, just with the importance of the defensive line and Dan Lanning's vision, I think you figure it out. If all those guys are actually willing to come to Oregon, that would be a phenomenal recruiting job, a phenomenal wins on the recruiting trail, plural. But yeah, so Solomon Williams is definitely liking where things are at. Some really strong quotes just talking about Oregon and Dan Lanning coming out of that visit. So I'm going to hopefully interview him myself. But I'm feeling pretty confident that Solomon Williams could end up committing to the Ducks. Not a sure thing. I don't think we have a decision timeline right now, but you figure he's probably one of those guys if he's committing to one of these schools that is considering enrolling early. So that's definitely a really big time recruit that you got to keep an eye on if you're an Oregon recruiting fan. Going to take a quick break and we'll be back on the other side. Welcome back to the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres. We're talking Oregon Recruiting Hour. We're on our Oregon Recruiting Hour, rather. It's Friday, October 27th. Ducks got a big matchup against Utah tomorrow on the road in Salt Lake City. I'm going to be back for my weekly recruiting hit on Fox Sports Eugene tomorrow. And that is going to be around 11 a.m. Ducks kick off at 12:30, I believe. So make sure you guys keep an eye out for that. It'll be on Fox Sports Eugene. And then I usually have it on my YouTube channel and in the podcasting feed. So don't miss that one. But we're going to get back to talking about some of these questions, taking some of these questions in the live chat, coming to you at Oregon Football Max Torres on YouTube, at M Torres Sports on Twitter, and the Ducks Digest Facebook page. Do me a favor, if you guys are here tuning in live, smash that like button for me. It's a tremendous help to the channel, and subscribe to the channel. I really like building up my presence here on YouTube. I think I give you guys a unique look at Oregon recruiting. I think I'm the only one in the Oregon market with boots on the ground recruiting coverage in a talent hotbed out here in Southern California. So I think that makes my coverage really unique. Trying to get to 3,000 subs. That is my goal. So I do it for you guys, and you can definitely help me get there by subscribing to the channel and sharing the podcast and my channel with other Duck fans. All right, let's get back some questions here. Purple Pawnee asks, is there any updates with Xavier Filsaime? Xavier Filsaime, he's a really big name in this 24 class, and I think he's one that you're probably going to hear a little bit more about as we get closer to that early signing period. I put a tweet out yesterday. We're like 8 weeks away from the early signing period. So in your head, you think, okay, 2 months, that's so much time. It is going to creep up on us so quickly, and it's going to be here before you know it. Time's going to fly. Oregon has essentially 3 more weekends for big recruiting weekends. If you want to host guys for big visits, you're looking at Cal next weekend, USC the following weekend, and then Oregon State on the back end at the day after Thanksgiving. I think that game's usually on that Friday. If you want to have guys come out for an official visit or any kind of visit, I guess you could have guys in the earlier part of December if you want. I just feel like if they're really big priorities, you want to try to get them on campus before then. And I think that's the case with Xavier Filsaime. He's a 5-star safety out of McKinney, Texas. He's currently committed to the Florida Gators, 6'1", 180 pounds. Not really any new updates on him in particular. I just think that I've heard some chatter that Oregon is still involved there. They're still recruiting him. They were one of his finalists before he committed to Florida. And Texas has really been central to Oregon's team and Oregon recruiting. That's one of the most talent-rich states in the entire country. Play some of the best football you'll find anywhere. Got commitments from Aaron Flowers, an All-American safety out of Forney, Texas in the 2024 class. Then you also have Adrian Wilson out of Pflugerville, Texas, Weiss High School. He's a big-time pass catcher, receiver in the 25 class. So the Ducks have definitely kept their foot on the gas as far as the 2024 and 2025 classes go in the state of Texas. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anybody, but I think it might just be Flowers now that Jackson Ford decommitted. So yeah, it's just Aaron Flowers, but Phil Symie is a guy that I think Oregon is still going to, take their shot at. They still have some really strong Texas ties on the staff. Will Stein is obviously the most prominent one that comes to mind, seeing that he came from the Austin area, coaching on the high school scene there, and then was at UTSA, and now he's the offensive coordinator at Oregon. So the Ducks have some very strong ties into Texas, and I think that they're a realistic option for Xavier Filsaime. You already have Aaron Flowers, who I mentioned, as well as Kingston Lopa, but you're going to take your shots with those five-star guys. This is why I really like how Dan Lanning and his coaching staff have managed the recruiting calendar and just their recruiting approach in general. If you rewind things, I feel like it's a cliche and I say it so many times, but this team does their heavy lifting in the spring months, in the summer months. So when the season comes around, you can focus on the on-field product and you can take your shots with guys like Xavier Filsaime, a five-star guy that maybe isn't looking likely that he's going to end up at Oregon, but you're so confident in the foundation that you've laid and the guys that you already have in the fold that you have some flexibility to pick up the phone and say, hey man, how are things going over there in Florida? You still trying to maybe give us a look, maybe come out here or something like that. I don't know if that's how the conversations necessarily go. This is just my hypothetical. If I were on the staff, right? So not really any new updates there, but Xavier Filsaime is a huge name in this class, and you make room for five stars. That's just kind of the way it goes. I'm not saying that Oregon needs to make room for him necessarily, or that they're, going to land him. I just think that they're still doing their homework. They're still chipping away at some of these top guys that are willing to hear him out and willing to listen. We got See Me on the Big Screen. Glad you're back, Max. Glad to be back. Super stoked to be back on the channel. Been doing a lot of writing, but you guys know I love podcasting. I wanted to say one thing really quick. Speaking about that, kind of being back, right? I did previously commit to doing the podcast 5 days a week, and I would love to do that. I really would. But things get crazy, and I'm running the show solo over on Ducks Digest, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the show every day. I would love to, but I'm going to just try to do it as often as I possibly can. I think that's kind of a way to maybe put it, and an update to kind of give you guys, because I love doing the podcast, but sometimes the writing has to take priority. So I'm going to be doing the podcast as often as I can. Maybe that'll be 5 days a week. Maybe it won't. But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys that update and let you know kind of what's going on there. All right, another question from comment from Andrew. He's a longtime listener, longtime supporter of the show, of the program. Andrew says, so if the Ducks miraculously pull a sweep and get Rushing, Seaton, Jericho Johnson, Jason Brown Jr., Solomon Williams, and why not include Eddie Pierre-Louis and McClellan, is the portal enclosed? Goes on to say, unless they don't make any portal offers, if they sign a 30 recruit class, they'd have to somehow or other force people out like Colorado did, right? Okay, lots going on in this question. I talked a little bit earlier about just the possibility to land these elite recruits. You try to figure it out. Some of these guys, you just take them and then figure it out later. I don't think they're going to sign 30 guys. 30 is a huge number. I think that they can be really selective now because of the work that they've done previously on the recruiting trail. So you like where Oregon's at there. But I think the biggest thing I want to say is I don't think the portal is ever closed. You're never going to close yourself off to the transfer portal. Look at the situation that Dabo's gotten himself into over there at Clemson. he has been the most staunchly opposed coach, if you can say it that way. He's been opposed to the portal, and that's gotten Clemson into trouble on the field. They're not as competitive as we're used to them being. They're kind of quote unquote down, and I think they've only lost 2 games. So I just wanted to mention that because I don't think Dan Lanning would be doing his job as head coach. He would probably tell you this too if he didn't look into the transfer portal, if he didn't fully explore an option, a method, a way for him to acquire elite talent. So even though it looks like Oregon is going to need to crunch some numbers here, I don't think you're ever going to close yourself off to the portal. And we've seen Oregon, this past offseason have a lot of movement in the portal, both bringing guys in and guys exiting the program. And I've also talked, I think I might have talked about it earlier on this episode earlier this week. A lot of the guys that left Oregon, you're not looking at necessarily big losses, right? I'm not trying to be critical of those guys. I'm just laying out the facts. You're not really seeing any guys that left Oregon that are having a massive impact at another school. You're not necessarily, you're maybe saying, oh, I wish that guy could have stayed. I feel like for me, it might be Dante Thornton. That was a guy I covered and, kind of got to know while I was in Eugene. But he's not really doing a whole lot at Tennessee. And again, that's like, I'm not trying to take a shot at him, but like, that's just the reality of the situation. And I think if he stayed at Oregon, he could have been pretty special. So you're never going to close yourself off from the transfer portal. It just doesn't make sense. I think you're doing yourself a disservice as a coach and as a program if you close yourself off from the portal and just say, hey, we're not going to take any portal guys this year. I think more than any position, you got to look at quarterback. Because Bo Nix is going to be gone, and I don't think you have a guy that's necessarily ready right now as it stands on Friday, October 27th. You don't have a guy that's ready to take over that offense on this roster. But a lot's going to happen between now and the start of the 24 season. I mean, I feel almost kind of foolish talking about it because we're only in like the halfway mark. So I don't want to get too deep into those discussions, but the point still stands. I think that you never close yourself off from the portal. Timonacci with a comment, with USC and Riley looking horrible, have you seen SoCal Recruit's interest wavering and any possible flips? It's only going to get worse for USC. Yeah, this is a really interesting topic. I mean, I know a lot of Oregon fans are obviously relishing USC's struggles right now. I don't even know if I guess you could say struggles because it's a little tricky. I did see that wide receiver Xavier Jordan is going to be visiting Utah this weekend. He's a wide receiver commit from Sierra Canyon out in Chatsworth, California, a SoCal guy I've covered a couple times. So that's an interesting development. If the Utes can steal one there, I know Oregon was involved. But I don't think it's going terribly for Utah or USC on the recruiting trail. They have the number 19 class according to 247 Sports. A couple of big-time guys like Cameron Fountain, Marcellus Williams, Jason Zandamela from the state of Florida committed in this class. But it was just interesting to look at, Riley's statement on recruiting the other day. I'm going to see if I can find it here so I can let you guys know what he said. And, obviously Oregon's always been in competition with USC when it comes to recruiting. But this is a tweet. Let me pull it up. A tweet from Antonio Morales. And Antonio Morales covers USC football for The Athletic. So let me go ahead and get this up. Get this tweet here. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. The tweet, Lincoln Riley had a long answer about recruiting today. Here's part of it, mainly on local recruiting. Riley said, as far as recruiting, whether it be national or local, to me, it's kind of all the same. How do you build the best roster you can of the guys that are available to go recruit? Because at the end of the day, if you go win the national championship and you have a roster mixed from all over the country, nobody's going to say, well, that's great, you won a national championship, but you don't have 80% local guys. The flip side is if you don't have a good year, they're not going to say, well, at least he has a bunch of California kids on the team. You clearly have to do a great job locally, but like I told you guys when I got here, it's about getting the right guys. I think in my evaluation of the program, when we got here and start looking at the roster, I think there were a lot of players from the state of California that, in my opinion, should not be on the USC roster for one reason or another. Hiding behind the curtain of, well, at least we're recruiting California kids doesn't do the program any good. Yeah, we want to get California kids. We want to get local kids. We want them to be the right kids, the right kind of kids, right kind of students, right kind of players that fit what we're building, not ones that go against the grain of what we're building. Yeah, this was a really interesting quote. I think the one that was interesting was when he said, when I got here, I think a lot of the players from the state of California that, in my opinion, should not be on the roster for one reason or another. I mean, when you look at the Pete Carroll glory years at USC, they were getting a lot of top end guys from Southern California, from USC. You know, there were programs that were just direct feeders. Southern California in general was just a feeder to USC, as makes a lot of sense. But so much has changed on the college football scene, on the recruiting scene from the Pete Carroll era until now with Lincoln Riley at USC, which is, you know, it's worth talking about because Oregon goes against USC for a lot of these recruits. So I haven't seen SoCal recruits interest wavering. Granted, I haven't really asked them about USC since this one happened, since this quote came out. But it's an interesting time at USC. I think Josh Pate said it really well on his show when he was talking about how he was comparing the USC and Clemson situations because they're both kind of struggling right now. Clemson doesn't use the portal, and USC, conversely, they built a majority of this team from the transfer portal or from recruits that followed Riley from Oklahoma. So I'm not trying to be critical of it. I'm just trying to break down kind of where things are at because Pate had a really good point saying that when you bring in a lot of guys from the portal, it can be a little bit tricky, you know, building that cohesion, building that chemistry, establishing the culture. And I think that building your program from the high school ranks is healthier, but at the same time, you got to find that balance. And I think that Oregon has done a really good job of finding that balance because you look at the guys that Dan Lanning has brought in from the portal, and a lot of these guys play a big role. Just look at this year. Ajani Cornelius, starting right tackle. Kyrie Jackson, starting corner. Nico Reed's playing a lot. Justin Jacobs, the Iowa linebacker transfer, he's probably going to see his snaps continue to go up as he comes back from injury. So I guess, yeah, it's not looking good for USC. I don't think he did himself any favors with local kids by, saying that when he got here, there were some California kids that shouldn't have been on the roster. That was really shocking to me to hear. But look at it this way. When USC was down with Clay Helton, who wasn't a terrible recruiter, but it wasn't that great. When USC was down under Clay Helton, Oregon capitalized. They came in and capitalized in a big way, taking some of the top guys from SoCal that usually go to USC, maybe usually go to UCLA, and now they're continuing to ascend. You know, granted, maybe it's a different conversation. This game against Utah is going to have massive playoff implications. I don't think that it's necessarily going to make or break Oregon recruiting-wise, but Oregon capitalized when USC was down, and they've only gotten stronger. I mean, I don't think you see them losing a lot of local battles for California kids to USC. Aiden Breland wasn't considering USC. Brandon Baker wasn't and still isn't considering USC. Nate Frasier, not in the running with USC. So Marcellus Williams from St. John Bosco is the headliner in their local kids that are going there. And then Xavier Jordan from Sierra Canyon, he's a local guy. Ryan Pelham from Long Beach Millikan, Isaiah Rubin from Los Alamitos, Marquise Gallegos. So there are local guys, but at least there haven't really been a lot of head-to-head battles as far as Oregon goes, where Oregon's losing out. So it's really interesting. I want to keep watching to see what happens for Lincoln Riley and USC, both on the field and on the recruiting trail. They got Cal this weekend. They're on the road in Berkeley, so that should be a pretty easy game for them. But I want to say USC plays Washington right before they play Oregon. I could be wrong there, but I think they play Washington when Oregon plays Cal, and then USC comes up to Eugene to face off against the Ducks in Autzen Stadium. So gonna be fun to see what happens there. But yeah, thanks for the comment, Timinachi. Let's see what else we have here. Darius P with another one. Do you think Solomon Williams is putting pressure on Elijah Rushing to commit sooner rather than later? No, I don't think so in particular. I think with rushing, he's a guy that Oregon's been pursuing and recruiting forever. So if he wants to come to Oregon, he's going to have a spot. He's that kind of a dude. He's special. So I don't think it's necessarily like that at all. I don't think this is a one or the other situation, which is kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about how Oregon's defensive line class could be just unreal if you couple the defensive line with the edge position. So that could be a really special group. So I don't think so. Playboy 1625. Any updates on 2025 guys? Yeah, I talked to a couple this week. I talked to Carson Cox. He's a SoCal running back that the Oregon staff really, really likes. I think he's a little bit underrated, but he was in town for the Washington State game, and that was a visit that went really well. Maybe it was the Colorado game, excuse me. But either way, Carson Cox was on campus recently for a visit, and he's holding Oregon in high regard, and he might even try to get back to Oregon for another game this season. As far as the running back position goes, I think you got to look at Carson Cox and Jordan Davison at modern day. That he's the number one running back in 2025. There's a lot of Texas buzz around Jordan Davison, but I know that the Oregon staff has done a good job with both of those guys. I kind of figured they're probably going to try to go for two backs. I think that's kind of been the norm with Carlos Laughlin since he took over the running back position at Oregon. So that's one guy. Another guy that I'm really excited about that I actually just talked to today. I'm not going to get all of the updates in here, but I'll at least just throw the 247 page up is Marco Jones. He's a 4-star edge rusher in the 2025 class out of San Ramon Valley High School in Danville, California, kind of East Bay type of deal. I wouldn't be surprised if he got to Oregon recently. He just went to Colorado for a visit, and he's going to be at Cal this weekend. So he's another big time guy out of the Bay Area that I had someone put me on Marco Jones, put him on my radar well over a year ago. And he's 6'5", 215, 220 pounds. So he's living up to the billing. He's also an elite baseball player. So Marco Jones is a West Coast guy, kind of comes from, that Bay Area is another talent hotbed in Northern California that Oregon's recruited really well. You got Jurion Dickey out of East Palo Alto in the 2023 class. You got Jerry Mixon out of San Francisco in the 23 class. So they've done a really good job in the Bay Area, and I think Marco Jones is a guy you got to look at. He's got just about everybody coming after him. I think Notre Dame is another school that he visited recently, and he wants to get back up to Oregon, has good connections with that staff. So Marco Jones is another one to watch. Talk to Caden Butler. Why do I always forget his name? I think that's his name. Yeah, Caden Butler. He's actually at Long Beach Poly as well. He's a 3-star wide receiver that recently moved from Kansas to Southern California. I got an interview with him, so I'll get it up on Ducks Digest, in the near future here. But Caden Butler is an exciting wide receiver. He saw a lot of offers come his way kind of right around when he moved, and Oregon was one of them. He was in Eugene last weekend for the Washington State game, and he's liking what he's hearing and seeing from Oregon. So he's another guy to watch here in the 2025 class. Thanks for the question. Jay Bryan, it would be great if we can get Aaron Hampton on a visit. Yeah, Aaron Hampton, 2024 athlete out of Dangerfield, Texas, currently committed to Texas. There was some buzz around him. I know that Oregon is trying to get him out on campus for a visit. That's kind of all I have on him right now. He came out and put a tweet out saying that he's locked in with Texas and is enrolling early, which if you're a Texas fan is great, but I wouldn't be discouraged by that. If you're an Oregon fan, there's still a lot of time, right? He's a 2024 guy, and I think you're going to try to continue getting him on campus as long as you're able to, like I kind of have said before, as long as they're willing to listen. Maybe he's not willing to listen anymore. I'm not sure. But he's a 2024 guy, 5'10", 175, and I think that the Ducks are looking at him to play wide receiver. They're still trying to get some wide receivers in this class. Last question or topic I want to kind of get into today is some wide receivers, and Colin Jones kind of beat me to it here. Colin Jones asks, chances of flipping Gatlin Bear or J Mac, Jeremiah McClellan. Those are kind of the two wide receivers, along with Aaron Hampton, that the Ducks are pushing for here still in the 2024 recruiting class. Excuse me. The updates we'll talk about both of those two, and I think it really kind of plays into a bigger theme of Oregon. Really, they're not going to leave any stone unturned for top guys in the 2024 class. They're still going for some flips. They're still going after guys that they missed the first time around, and Gatlin Bear is one of them. Out of Burley, Idaho, Junior Adams and Joe Lorig took the private jet to go visit Gatlin Bear. I think it was last week. He's a 6'2" wide receiver committed to Boise State, and the dude's got wheels. That is exactly what is drawing everyone to him. Runs a 10.15 in the 100, but I think actually isn't planning to run track at the next level. Comes from a family of elite athletes. I want to say he has an older brother and sister. I could be remembering that wrong, but there are some elite athletes out there in Idaho. I know that Michigan is another school that has stayed involved here with Gatlin Bear's recruitment. He was originally a guy that was looking at Michigan, took an official visit to Michigan, had Michigan in his top 5, along with Oregon, TCU, Nebraska. So Gatlin Bear is a guy that Boise State does not typically get, right? Andy Avalos, former Oregon DC, is over there as the head coach in Boise now. But the unique thing with Gatlin Bear is that he's going to be taking a mission trip after he graduates high school. So he's actually not going to be playing his college football until 2026 is what it's looking like, even though he's a 2024 guy. So I think it's an interesting situation because Oregon doesn't typically recruit a lot of guys that are going on mission trips. I think maybe that's just because they want to get guys that are ready to contribute and kind of compete right away. But maybe that's changing now with Oregon taking that visit out to see Gatlin Bear in a game last week. So they're trying to stay involved, right? And I think I heard that Boise State was also in attendance at that game. So Gatlin did a quick interview and said, he's still committed to Boise. He wouldn't say that there's momentum with any of these other schools, just kind of putting it out there that he's still locked in with Boise State. But I mean, he's a top receiver, right? He's a 4-star guy, elite speed. I think it's still realistic. I mean, Oregon's gotten guys out of Idaho before. Kenyon Sadiq is the main one that you think about here out of Idaho. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year last year and is making some plays like springing the Bo Nix for that touchdown run last week as a true freshman. So I wouldn't say this is a guy that I'm confident Oregon can flip, but it's definitely encouraging to see that they're still going after these guys, even though they're committed to other schools. Nothing's final until the ink dries on that national letter of intent. And as we saw, as we've seen with other recruits, Peyton Bowen, that whole debacle last year, he flipped from Notre Dame to Oregon and then Oregon to Oklahoma. And now he's making plays for Brent Venables and the Sooners as a true freshman. So recruiting is chaotic. It's absolutely chaotic. It's fluid. It's not a perfect science by any means. So you're going to keep going. You're going to keep going and trying to get these guys. I think the next step for Oregon would probably be just to have continued contact with Gatlin and try to get him on campus for a visit if he's willing. But the other guy you have to talk about is Jeremiah McClellan, the Ohio State wide receiver commit out of St. Louis, Missouri. He popped up in Eugene for an unofficial visit for the Colorado game. And I even heard some rumors that they're trying to get him back out for the USC game for a visit and maybe in December as well. You would think that those are super crucial visits. He did make it out to Ohio State, for a recent visit. So, that Brian Hartline and the Buckeyes are trying to do what they can to, firm up his commitment status. I think that the reason that Oregon still has a chance here is not only because of Junior Adams, not only because Jeremiah McClellan's been to Oregon numerous times for visits and has strong relationships with the staff. He's a Missouri guy where Dan Lanning is from, so that's going to be a priority for Dan Lanning. But I think there's still a lot of smoke around Brian Hartline going to the NFL. I mean, I don't know if it's legitimate, but those rumors are out there. And as long as that's going to happen, I think that that's going to create an opening for Oregon with Jeremiah McClellan. because it's hard to flip a guy in general, but a wide receiver, especially from Ohio State, given their history at the position. It doesn't look like Jeremiah Smith's going anywhere, so that's a really big priority for them. He's the number one wideout in this class, I think, committed to Ohio State from the state of Florida. But Oregon's going to keep working on Jeremiah McClellan. They are. So Jeremiah McClellan and Gatlin Bear look like the guys that they're working on. Aaron Hampton was another one, right? We talked about him earlier on in this show. So I'd feel more confident about Jeremiah McClellan right now than Gatlin Bear. But granted, I really haven't been super tapped in at any point, admittedly, on Gatlin Bear in this recruiting cycle. So hopefully I can change that, make some calls. But I have, at times I had the scoop on, Jeremiah McClellan coming out for a visit for that game when he did. So we'll see if I can get some more scoop and intel on Oregon's chances there. But that's kind of the latest I'm hearing, is that it looks like he could make it out for multiple unofficial visits between now and the early signing period. But we got to see if those trips actually happen, because rumors and intel or rumors and smoke don't mean a whole lot, but intel does, and real visits do. So that's something to keep an eye on. But hey, that'll do it for me, you guys, on today's episode of the podcast. We just hit an hour, so a lot of really good stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Reminder to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I love doing these live streams, interacting with you guys. Big game for the Ducks tomorrow against the Utes. I'll have my game day recruiting hit, like I said, out tomorrow. Important to lock in with me on social media at Torres Sports on both Twitter and Instagram, at Oregon Football Max Torres on YouTube, and you can read all my stuff over on ducksdigest.com. But until next time, that'll do it for me. Thank you guys so much for listening to and tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.